around the nation, UID Nation, Paul up here with you. Welcome to the show. It's Tuesday. It's an interesting news day today. We have pretty important testimony coming in from, or I should say about, the Ukrainian call, or call with the Ukrainian leader, Vladimir Zelensky. So that's really interesting. We also had the Republican reaction to it already, and it's disastrous. We've got that. Not only that, but we're going to talk about Donald Trump making money off the presidency, of course, how much he has made so far and how. Then we are, of course, going to talk about Joe Biden. So Joe Biden, I talked about how he's got a super PAC now, and he gets directly challenged in a video, and it is fantastic and also incredibly condescending. So I'm going to talk about that. Interesting stuff on the show. So, and then we also have a Republican economist leaving the GOP because of President Trump. So interesting stuff, like I said today. Yeah. So please like and share the stream. Well, again, important stuff. A lot of Ukraine focused. And of course, something that really bothers me about this is when people say the Ukraine. And I know it bothers me even though I've done it before. That's probably why it bothers me even more. But I'm going to talk about that because there is a lot of these Republicans are like, the Ukraine, the Ukraine. It's not the, it's actually Ukraine. I know, it's crazy. But anyway, it's a strange thing to have a pet peeve about, but apparently I have it, and it bothers me. But hey, you know what? That's why we're here. We're here to talk about things that bother me. That's the whole premise of the show. I got a lot of grievances, and now you people are going to hear about it. Festivus has come early to the show. All right. So before I go into the stories, again, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Super chats, questions, comments, etc. Please leave them. I do like to read them. I will read, of course, member comments first, as usual. So if you're a member, that's like pretty much the only perk of membership, other than knowing, of course, that you support this show and in the future make sure that we can continue being on the air. Okay. Anyway, so I guess we can get started with a little bit of President Trump being corrupt. So let's just start there. Okay. President Trump continues to personally cash in on being president of the United States, which is something that you're actually not supposed to be able to do. So let me give you the details on this. According to an analysis of FEC spending records, in addition to spending by the U.S., as well as foreign governments, which of course leads into foreign emoluments, going into his businesses, which does run afoul of the Constitution, which is why there are investigations into emoluments violations by the president. You also have Republican congressmen, as well as political action committees spending money at Trump's properties. So now, not only that, but you have the president's own campaign and affiliated PACs also spending millions of dollars at his businesses, and they've been doing so since he started running in 2016. So there's a breakdown of how much money was spent, not only in this cycle, but also over the last several years. And so it's really interesting. And again, this breakdown was done by basically examining spending reports by the, released by the FEC and examined by the Center for Responsive Politics. So they do a lot of really, really great work looking at, where the money is coming from and where is it going. As much as they can, of course, when in dealing with 501c4s and C3s, super PACs. All right, so now let me give you the numbers, right? So Republican political campaigns so far this year have spent just about $1.8 million at Trump-owned businesses. And so this is so far in the election cycle, and really the election. I mean, it's the election spending barely begun. We're still somewhere around nearly 100 days out from the start of the primary, the Iowa caucuses. That starts off primary season, and so we still got to get through a primary and then through a general election. So who knows how much money these PACs and these politicians will start spending at Trump properties, and how much of that will continue to go to Donald Trump's pockets. So now, most of that money, that $1.8 million, by the way, 1.3 of it was spent by the Trump campaign. And so the Trump campaign, they will go and they will basically rent rooms or rent space and hold fundraisers at Trump resorts. Not only that, but you also have about $123,000 of that money being spent by the Republican National Committee, the RNC, and $104,000 by the Great America Political Action Committee, according to the records. So now there's a couple of ways that this benefits Donald Trump. So for one, when he holds a fundraiser at one of his properties, he's obviously holding a fundraiser. That money will allow donors, of course, to contribute to his campaign. Okay, so that's the nature of fundraisers. And look, I call that legalized bribery because in America, we have taken this situation where corporations or I should say in this case, bundlers and very large donors can go and essentially bribe a politician by giving them a gigantic stack of money and saying, okay, well, I have now spoken to you about this, and now maybe later I might expect something in return. That is, of course, our legalized bribery system. And you know what the Supreme Court calls that? They call that speech. When it's so obvious bribery. Oh, no. They're just talking to each other with giant stacks of money and an expectation for a return on investment. You know, the funny thing is, Donald Trump himself, back in 2015, 2016, said, well, man, the donors, basically we give these politicians money and they do whatever the hell we wanted to. Well, now Donald Trump's on the opposite end of that because now he's receiving donations from places like the NRA and from fossil fuel companies, as well as other gigantic corporate donors. Kind of funny how that turns around. But anyway, so now, like I said, that's the first way they benefit when they hold these gigantic fundraisers at Trump properties. He gets all that money in donations. Now, the other benefit is that the business collects funds from campaigns or from the campaign for space rental and catering, some of which does ultimately end up in President Trump's pockets. Now, you want to talk about corruption? That's a good example of corruption. And by the way, Donald Trump has not divested from his properties. And this entire thing is a reason why people should be divesting. In fact, again, you had Jimmy Carter having to divest from his little peanut farm when he became president because they were so concerned about conflicts of interest. But Donald Trump, he does it and Republicans don't bat an eye. Oh, no, of course he's going to sit there and run his businesses and still profit from his businesses, even though technically it's in a blind trust and his sons are technically running it and they don't call him or talk to him about it. Really? You believe that? You do? I got a bridge to sell you. Okay, anyway, so now it gets better for President Trump. So now it turns out that a total of 48 Republican members of Congress also spent their campaign money, again, from donors, at Trump businesses through their campaign and affiliated committees, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. So some of the top spenders for the 2020 cycle included campaigns for former Representative Sean Duffy of Wisconsin. Let's see. You also have Vice President Mike Pence, his older brother, Greg Pence, which I didn't know he had a brother. So that's kind of interesting. So instead of
Mike Pounds,
it's Greg Pounds. Okay. Anyway, you also have Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy of California. Oh, and look, all these people are deeply pro-Trump. Shocker. Okay. So, and by the way, these Republican politicians are expected to spend a lot more at Trump's properties. And Donald Trump knows this, and so does the organization. And so here's what they do. Here's another part of the grift, right? Is that since there's a campaign season that is ramping up, Donald Trump, the Trump organization itself, is now raising the prices of its rooms. Now, remember, they did the same thing at Mar-a-Lago after Trump became president. Oh, well, now I'm president. I'm going to have to raise my membership fees to Mar-a-Lago from $100,000 to $200,000 a year. So, and of course, that just happens when, again, he becomes president. And a lot of people decide they want to join Mar-a-Lago to get access to him. Again, it's so incredibly obvious. This corruption, it's literally right in your face. It's funneling that money right into his pocket. And again, that's how this works, right? According to the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, room rates during the time of where the Republicans who are going to hold a Save the Senate retreat at Trump's Washington, D.C. hotel during that same time, and that was reported, of course, by The Intercept, the room rates will be triple what they normally are. Oh, look, Republicans are holding a Save the Senate rally to, try to continue to enact President Trump's Republican agenda. Well, we don't really care about our agenda. No, all I care about is making money, so we're going to triple the rooms. And guess what? The donors are going to end up being the ones paying. Because, of course, that's how this works, right? Now, look, and by the way, Trump knows this. He's got a talent for grifting. I mean, he's been doing it just about his entire life. He cannot really make all that much money legitimately because he's a terrible businessman, which is why he's had to run scam colleges, why he's had to take out numerous junk loans to the point of which no one will lend him money, save for the Russians, save for Deutsche Bank. Went bankrupt 6 times. 6 times. And so, again, he's got to scam everybody. And now in this case, he's literally scamming his own party. How ironic, right? Members of his own party and even his own campaign, which of course really is scamming the donors. And the donors, they don't care because they got all this money. And by the way, Donald, because of the Republican tax cuts, these donors saved millions of dollars in taxes per year. So, of course, I guess it's not really a scam to them, but it is a scam for the rest of us. Now, let me give you more information here. So now, ProPublica had actually done this back in 2018, and it noted that campaigns and public expenditures at Trump businesses had exceeded over $16 million. Now, they, of course, examined not only campaign spending reports, the FEC, but also state government spending and federal agency expenditure records. So some of that, of course, is taxpayer money. If it is government spending, more emoluments, by the way, violations. Now, the top preferred businesses by spenders were Trump's Washington hotel, followed by Mar-a-Lago, according to the Center. Trump's Doral golf resort in Miami was 5th for the amount of incoming campaign expenditures. And by the way, this is also why he tried to move the G7 summit to the Doral resort. He wanted to make all that money from these, again, foreign governments coming in with their staffs, paying room fees. And again, there's no transparency, so we don't know if his promise of, oh, don't worry, we're not actually going to profit off this. We don't know that for sure, especially if you won't actually release any sort of records. And guaranteed, you would not release records. And so this would be another way for Donald Trump to make money. And look, Republican politicians, they knew this, and that actually was the line. Weirdly enough, this is where they drew the line. Not because they care about bribery or anything like that or self-dealing. No, it's because it became increasingly difficult to defend the president, since it is so brazen and so out in the open. And so that's why, of course, Donald Trump had to pull that back and say, okay, even though it would have been the best G7 ever, not going to do it at Doral. Because, of course, the obvious self-dealing. But in total, by the way, that $16 million, that's not all he's made. In fact, in total, so far, his companies have made over $18 million in political spending from various politicians, super PACs, and government entities since Trump became president. That is a lot of money that he has hauled in. He's draining the swamp all right into his own pockets. That's who he is. Okay. All right. Okay. A Republican economist has had enough of the Republicans under President Trump. So now this is Republican economist Greg Manke, and I may be saying that wrong. Now, he is the chair of the economic advisors under former President George W. Bush. So this guy's fairly conservative. He taught a course on neo-Keynesianism, and so he is an establishment Republican / economist, and so he fits right in with, of course, the old Republican Party, which again is the party of basically income and economic inequality. And so he's very much your, again, establishment Republican that thinks, I want the rich to make money. Okay, so now he fits along with Mitt Romney, and look, there's a relationship, by the way, between him and Mitt Romney, and so it's not surprising that he has joined along with Mitt Romney in criticizing President Trump, and has been doing so, to be fair, since about 2016. So now, in a blog post amplified by CNN's Jake Tapper, Manke revealed that he had left the Republican Party. He had switched his voter registration from Republican to Independent. And so in a blog post, he spells out why. He says, quote, "First, the Republican Party has largely become the party of Trump. Too many Republicans in Congress are willing, in the interest of protecting their jobs, to overlook Trump's misdeeds." So look, does he make a point? Absolutely. When pointing out the cowardice of Republican congressmen, politicians, absolutely. And I don't think yes, they are worried about their jobs. Really, the worry is about the base rejecting these Republican politicians that happen to turn against Donald Trump. And so it is a risk for them politically. And so, look, I call them absolute cowards because that's what they are. They're too cowardly to take on President Trump. And therefore, they're like, yes, sir, kiss the ring, kiss the ring. And that's what they have to do in order to maintain their power and privilege. All right, so now he also, in the same post, said this about Democrats, because he loves to play the both sides game, right? Just as too many Democrats were for Clinton during his impeachment. Well, now, wait a minute. Where was the crime in Bill Clinton's impeachment? He had a consensual affair with an intern. Now, look, I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. I mean, the only time that I point that out is when there's hypocrisy involved. Again, if you want to call hypocrisy, Newt Gingrich is a great example, right? So Gingrich, while going after President Clinton for his affair, also had an affair of his own. No, that's hypocrisy. Now, I don't care what Newt Gingrich is up to. Yes, he's a gross individual, but should that really matter about his job? And so that's the thing, right? So I don't really care what you do in your personal life, as long as it doesn't impact your job. But again, Republicans, they seem to care more about these issues than I think I do. And so I mean, I guess that's a difference of worldview. Um, but I didn't care about that. But what it was with the Clinton impeachment was essentially, oh, we were looking into Whitewater, we were looking into this, real estate deal, this supposed corruption by Bill Clinton. We didn't find anything, but hey, look, a blowjob. Gonna go after it. So that's what they did. And when it comes to, the law, again, he didn't break any law, right? But okay, you want to play that both sides game? That's fine. All right. So now, um, here's the thing. So now he said this about Republicans. I have no interest in associating myself with that behavior. Maybe someday the party will return to having honorable leaders like Bush, McCain, and Romney. Until then, count me out. Okay. So, a couple of issues with that, right? So the Republican Party, I don't know if he really understands the Republican Party. Again, this guy is a member of the GOP, served, under Republican presidents. But does he really think the Republicans had honor when it came to George W. Bush? Or maybe he meant George H.W. Bush, right? Uh, John McCain and Mitt Romney. Really? Okay, so now here's the thing. If you think George W. Bush has honor, well, I got something to tell you, right? I think you're wrong. Why? It's because George W. Bush is a war criminal. I mean, tell the million Iraqis that are dead that George W. Bush had honor. Come on, dude. Mitt Romney, of course, Mitt Romney is one percenter, wants to give basically all the money to the rich. And John McCain, look, with all the, there are some positive, of course, things that John McCain had done. For example, working on Money in Politics with McCain Feingold, and that kind of stuff. Okay. And of course, standing up to Donald Trump. But at the same time, John McCain was an absolute warmonger. He never met a war he didn't like. So, whether it be going after Iraq, whether it be going after Iran or North Korea, whatever, any chance he had at attacking another country, John McCain was all for it. So I don't even really have any respect for John McCain, George W. Bush, or Mitt Romney. And I think Mitt Romney is actually the least worst among those people, even though Mitt Romney said 47% of Americans are moochers. So this is a guy that Greg Menke thinks, oh no, we have total respect for you. I wish we could go back to the party of that. But see, the thing about the Republican Party is that veneer of supposed respectability always hid the racist underbelly underneath. And so that's, again, the big issue with the Republican Party, which apparently this guy either didn't know about or didn't see. But see, Donald Trump is literally the id of the Republican Party. So he has taken off the mask of what actually lies underneath, which is what the voters believe. And the voters, they believe in these insane conspiracy theories that, climate change is a hoax. And they have long perpetuated this, thanks, of course, to, the efforts of ExxonMobil, these think tanks, Republican politicians, Republican pundits on Fox News and Rush Limbaugh, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? These are people deeply into Republican politics. And this is driven by businesses, corporations that fund these politicians in order to do this climate denial. Now, Greg Menke, I believe he thinks he believes in a carbon tax, but it has to be revenue neutral, right, in order to change behavior. And so I would think that this guy seems more like a moderate, sort of kind of reasonable Republican, right? Even if he's too mired in this respectability, civility politics, at least it seems like this guy is willing to take the information and say, well, I don't like the racism. At least I don't like the overt racism. And I don't like all the gross stuff that President Trump brings to the table. Okay, I get that. But remember, all that stuff was hiding underneath of your own party. And maybe this guy just finally realized it and thought, I can't be a part of that. But at the same time, he's no progressive. He's no liberal, right? And let me explain that because he's got a couple of quotes here. So now, let me go to this. He says, on his opinion of the Democratic nomination. And by the way, he's he lives in Massachusetts, and they've got open primaries. And so, look, he's planning to take his independent vote and vote in the primary. And of course, where's he going to go? He's going to go for, of course, the centrists, right? If he decides to actually be involved in the Democratic primary. He said, the Democratic Party is at a crossroads where it has to choose either a center-left candidate, Biden, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, or Yang, or a far-left populist, Warren Sanders, as their nominee for president. I intend to help them choose the former. The latter proposed to move the country too far in a direction of heavy-handed state control. So now, okay, I don't think he understands where the center is. At least, look, here in America, we have this incredibly skewed version of politics, right? That is different from the rest of the world. We are deeply right-wing here. In reality, Bernie Sanders would be considered the centrist because he has the centrist positions, the ones that make the most sense. Again, universal health care, when you run it by the numbers, saves money and covers every single American man, woman, and child. Well, he looks at that and says, heavy-handed state control. I don't like that. No, I would rather have thousands, or I should say millions of uninsured people continue to die from preventable diseases. Okay, well, I disagree with that. But again, I guess that's the standard conservative slash centrist in our context position. But again, when it comes to the world, these are centrist ideas. Actually, like most people will look at a situation and be like, our healthcare situation, and wonder how can we do this to our own people? How can we not guarantee healthcare for every single man, woman, and child? But again, I guess it's a difference in ideology, right? But it does show you that he would be more than willing to vote for someone who basically embodies no status quo, embodies the status quo and zero change. And that's what this is about, really. This is about somebody who is enmeshed in the system and who has promoted this system through his teachings of an economic course, which, by the way, interesting reading on looking up him. It turns out that there had been a massive student walkout during one of his courses. Now, interestingly enough, the people that walked out said, look, your economics course is flawed. It doesn't actually go in and look at the income and wealth inequality or provide any sort of solutions to those to that problem, right, of economic inequality. So we're going to walk out. You know what they did? They ended up walking out and joining Occupy Boston. So kind of awesome for the students, right? So it kind of shows the kind of economics that is the accepted standard establishment. Let's give tax breaks and stuff to the rich, and let's not do too much, welfare or anything like that, or the dreaded socialism, and make sure things continue to be business friendly. Again, this is your standard establishment, Democrat, centrist kind of worldview. And so that's where this guy really kind of falls on this, right? So now, one more quote here from his article. He says this, in doing so, if people vote, or try to go for Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, he has a warning. He said, they tempt those in the center and center right to hold their noses and vote for Trump's reelection. Now, you get that? Now, he is being unintentionally honest here, I think. Maybe too honest. Or maybe he's being totally intentionally honest. I don't know. But he's basically saying, look, us people who we consider to be in the centrists, right, in the centrist position, we would rather have a fascist or proto-fascist that personally I left the Republican Party for, by the way, because I disagreed with him so much and his ugliness. But we would still rather have that guy than a progressive. That's what that is, right? So so what is the real problem this guy has with Donald Trump? Maybe the fact that he doesn't like his trade policy. Okay, that's fair. There's a lot of problems with Donald Trump's trade policy, so I kind of agree with that, right? Trade wars, etc. But then again, this guy's also for essentially unfettered free trade, which can lead to certain problems like outsourcing and the general driving down of wages. But that's neither here nor there really. Um, and not wanting to get into a bigger discussion about trade policy. But basically, I think it's just the fact that Trump pulled the mask of civility off of the Republican Party and exposed them, I think, for what they are. And he looked at that and said, I don't want to be a part of that. But I still want the same kind of policies, at least when it comes to economics, tax cuts for the rich, or low taxes for the rich and corporations mainly, which he got through the Trump administration. And, yes, some regulations on the environment, again, the carbon tax, etc. So at least something on climate change. But generally, try to stay in the status quo. I'm more comfortable with the Buttigiegs and the Romneys and the people who aren't going to do too much change in either direction. So that's really seems like who this guy is. All right. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We've got the Vindman testimony. We've got a statement from him that he's expected to testify behind closed doors. I'm going to talk about some quotes from that statement that are really, really damning when it comes to President Trump. So, all right. All that and more, including Republican reaction after the break. We'll see you here a couple minutes from the nation.
Mike Pence.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so we have some super chats. I'm sorry, not super chats. Members to shout out. So let me go to that. That's patreon.com/TWT Nation. I want to give a shout out to Karen Von Schmidt, Catherine Bruce, Kathy Sizemore, Kevin Broom, and Khalid Nixon. So thank you, patreon.com/TWT Nation. That's you can sign up to support independent progressive media. Then we have channel members, Frederick Turner, Kathy Jo Simonton, Kimberly Seja, and E. Joseph Oppegard Peltier III. Thank you. Love saying that name for some reason. Okay, but thank you. So that's Patreon. That's memberships. That's YouTube membership. You can sign up to become a member using the join button below. Okay, so I don't really know if I have a lot of time for comments here. So let's just dive into it with this story. Okay. All right, hold on here. Nope. Oh. Okay. So we have a new update on the situation with the Ukraine call. We have a new witness. So now this witness is testifying today about President Trump's call with the Ukrainian leader, Volodymyr Zelensky. So now the Washington Post is reporting that a White House national security official, who is a decorated Iraq War veteran, now plans to tell House impeachment investigators that he heard President Trump's appeal to the Ukrainian president to investigate Joe Biden, also investigating Elizabeth Warren too, and looking into CrowdStrike. So that's a conspiracy theory floated by right-wing conspiracy theorists that are trying to discredit the Mueller report. So now the man in question, the witness, is Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. So now he is a top Ukraine expert on the National Security Council. He is Ukrainian-born himself, but a naturalized citizen. And so what happened, and the reason that he's testifying, is that twice he registered internal objections about how Mr. Trump and his inner circle were treating the country of Ukraine. So now this is someone who has, according to the New York Times, listened to the call himself. So he listened to the call. Now later on, I've got a Trump tweet that is bananas that directly contradicts this. So now, first, before we go to that, let's go to his statement, which has a lot of interesting things in it. For one, he said that he did not think it was proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen. Now, we heard that same thing from, of course, William Taylor, who had also testified earlier and showed up in text messages between Gordon Sondland and William Taylor, Bill Taylor himself, as well as Kurt Volker. Now, those texts were also released by Volker earlier this month. So now there's that language, right? It's not proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen. Now, he said he was worried about the implications for the U.S. government's support of Ukraine. And of course, that he means the military support that defends Ukraine against Russian aggression. Remember, Russia had came in and basically claimed Crimea from Ukrainians. So now, he said in his statement, I realize that if Ukraine pursued an investigation into the Bidens and Burisma, it would likely be interpreted as a partisan play, which would undoubtedly result in Ukraine losing the bipartisan support it has thus far maintained. So again, he was concerned and worried about Ukraine being able, basically losing that security assistance, that near $400 million, um, that was originally promised, of course, to Ukraine to help defend themselves against any possible aggression. So now, in his testimony, Vindman also says that he is not the whistleblower, so that's an important distinction, but will provide an account that corroborates crucial elements of the whistleblower complaint that we have also seen. So now, let me give you more from his statement. He said, I did convey certain concerns internally to national security officials in accordance with my decades of experience and training and sense of duty and obligation to operate within the chain of command. So, again, important, showing that he is not the whistleblower, that he's, of course, following all the rules, doing everything that you're supposed to when you find something troubling. Okay, so basically following the law. Now, he's also planning to testify that he watched it with alarm as, quote, outside influencers began pushing a false narrative about Ukraine that was counter to the consensus view of American national security officials and harmful to U.S. interests, according to documents reviewed by the Times on the eve of his congressional testimony. Colonel Vindman was concerned as he discovered Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal lawyer, was leading an effort to prod Kiev into investigating Hunter Biden and to discredit efforts to investigate Mr. Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, and his business dealings in Ukraine. So now, look, again, that's super important. His account suggests that he may have been among some of the aides that the whistleblower referred to in his complaint when he said that White House officials had recounted the conversation between Trump and Zelensky to him and were, quote, deeply disturbed by what had been transpired in that phone call. So now, that's interesting, that he would be part of those officials, and it certainly goes along with previous testimony. I mean, look, what do you believe, right? You have all these different officials that essentially have the same story. Hey, there was this call to Ukraine. We heard it from someone else, or in this case, I literally heard it. I was worried, and so I went up the chain of command because this was very concerning. We have a president that is using his position, pressuring a foreign country to do a political investigation to help his chances at re-election. Deeply disturbing indeed. Now, he also will testify that he confronted Gordon Sondland. Now, Gordon Sondland might be in a little bit of trouble. It turns out he might have actually lied during his own testimony. Now, Sondland, of course, was, like I said, confronted by this officer the day that the envoy spoke in a White House meeting with Ukrainian officials about Ukraine delivering specific investigations in order to secure a meeting with the President of the United States. And on two occasions, the colonel brought his concerns to John Eisenberg, the top lawyer at the National Security Council. One of the times they described happened July 10th. Now, that was when senior American officials were meeting with senior Ukrainian officials at the White House. This is a time where apparently John Bolton was said to have had a tense exchange with Mr. Sondland after the ambassador raised a matter of investigations he wanted Ukraine to undertake. I know any story where John Bolton is kind of the good guy is a disastrous story, indeed. Such is the world that we have lived in. Okay, now, more. At a debriefing later that day, attended by the colonel, Mr. Sondland again urged Ukrainian officials to help the investigations into Trump's political rivals. Again, lots and lots of pressure. According to Vindman's statement, Ambassador Sondland emphasized the importance that Ukraine deliver the investigations into the 2016 elections, the Bidens, and Burisma. I stated to Ambassador Sondland that his statements were inappropriate and that the request to investigate Biden and his son had nothing to do with national security, and that such investigations were not something the NSC was going to get involved in or push. Now, the colonel said that after his confrontation with Sondland, the actor Fiona Hill then entered the room and asserted to the ambassador Sondland that his statements were inappropriate, Fiona Hill, of course, had also previously testified to Congress as well about Sondland and this entire situation. So again, we have more corroborating evidence. So now, she also, Ms. Hill, had reported the incident to Mr. Eisenberg, right? So now the colonel also went to Mr. Eisenberg a couple of weeks later after the call with Zelensky, and this kind of lines up with Taylor's testimony. So you have, again, all these different officials in the White House that are saying the same thing. There was pressure on Ukraine to do the investigation, and it was all coming from the top. Damning testimony. And so now what's important about this is that this is already going to be very difficult for conservatives to push back on, right? So now this guy is a Purple Heart recipient. He served in Iraq. He's been in the military for 20 years. And so, look, he believes, apparently, according to, well, I should say, if you read his statement, he talks a lot about duty, talks a lot about patriotism. And so it's going to be a little bit difficult to paint him as not credible. But of course, we already have Republicans that are doing exactly such. Remember, he is a Ukrainian-born immigrant. So he came over here. His family brought him here when he was 3 years old. He's a naturalized citizen now. But at the same time, now you got Republicans that are using that against him. But I don't know if that's going to be as effective towards the base, especially when you've got the military guys. Right now, the military guys are still a large component of Trump's base, but he's on thin ice with them already over abandoning the Kurds in Syria. That was a deeply unpopular decision made by President Trump without consulting allies. Because look, these military guys, they worked with the Kurds. They served with the Kurds when they were fighting together. There was recently a joint operation to take on Abu al-Baghdadi, who's the head of ISIS, right? To try to take him down. They'd been working on that for months. And the Syrian Kurds were, of course, the point people that were doing most of the heavy fighting, and our troops were working with them. When you pull out, suddenly, with people that you've been working so closely with for a long time, well, that's going to get people pretty angry. And so I don't know how effective these smears will be against Vindman by, when it comes to the military guys. Well, we will have to see. But first, I'm going to give you, before we end the segment, I'm going to give you Trump's reaction to this real quick. Here's his tweet. How many more never Trumpers will be allowed to testify about a perfectly appropriate phone call when all anyone has to do is read the transcript? Well, it's funny because we don't actually have the transcript. The transcript is literally locked away in a secret computer server. So no, we can't read the transcript. All we can do is read your memo, which we don't know what you took out of the memo. And already, what's in the memo is bad enough already, right? Imagine if what they decided to take out. Yikes. So, look, let me finish that tweet. He said, I knew people were listening in the call. Why would I say something inappropriate, which was fine with me, but why so many? No, here's the thing. Donald Trump still thinks this is an appropriate call because he didn't say the words quid pro quo, for one, and that he wasn't as super obvious as he could be while still getting his message across. He didn't have to say, oh, I want you to, do a political investigation of my political opponents. No, I want you to look into corruption. I want you to do me a favor. He doesn't understand that subtlety. He doesn't understand that nuance. He's not smart enough to cover his tracks. He's an incredibly dumb person. And so he looks at the call and thinks, what, it's perfect. I didn't say anything, completely obvious. I mean, at least to me. So why would I get in trouble for this? Because I knew people were listening in. I'm not that stupid. No, you're still pretty stupid. But he continues one more tweet. Supposedly, according to the corrupt media, the Ukraine call concerned today's never-Trumper witness. Again, that's part of the smear, saying that, oh, he's a never-Trumper. Well, we don't know that. We don't know anything about his political affiliation. He could be a very staunch conservative, maybe even a Trump supporter. I don't know. But nonetheless, that's the assumption. He's a never-Trumper. And he said, was he on the same call that I was? Can't be possible. Please ask him to read the transcript of the call. Witch hunt. So that's Trump's response to that. Witch hunt, never-Trumper, and read the transcript, which, again, we don't have access to. Maybe he would, but we certainly don't. But why would you have to read the transcript if you were literally on the call? Nonsensical. But again, that's the going message against this guy. But I don't know if the military people are going to buy it. We're just going to have to see where this testimony leads to. All right. So let's go to more reaction here. All right. Now, with the testimony of Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman underway, President Trump's defenders are now in a panic to smear what could be the most dangerous witness to Donald Trump's criminality in the call with Ukraine. So now first, we've got Fox host Laura Ingraham, right? So now on Monday's show, she is accusing the Ukrainian-born Vindman of being a double agent for Ukraine. I'm not kidding. On her Monday show, Ingraham and her guest John Yoo, of course, authored the torture memos, discussed how Vindman is a Ukrainian immigrant and therefore has dual loyalty. Said, quote, he's a decorated colonel, by the way, in the Iraq War, but because Colonel Vindman emigrated to Ukraine along with his family when he was 3, and is fluent in Ukrainian and Russian, Ukrainian officials sought advice from him about how to deal with Mr. Giuliani. Well, here's the thing. Vindman, in his statement, says, I was very worried about Giuliani actually doing this. And so I brought it to my superior not once, but twice, this entire thing. Once before the call, once after the call. Now, she continued by saying, here we have a U.S. national security official who is advising Ukraine while working inside the White House, apparently against the president's interest. There's no proof of that. And usually they spoke in English. Isn't that kind of an interesting angle on the story? In which you replied, you know, some people might call that espionage. So, oh no, this guy, decorated war veteran, right? Purple Heart recipient, served in the Iraq War, did all this stuff, right? Well, he's a Ukrainian immigrant, and so therefore, he must be serving Ukraine. He must be a double agent. He must be a spy. Those are some really heavy allegations here. But there's more. We've got a video here from former Representative Sean Duffy. So now, he's a former Republican and a Trump supporter, and this is what this is a conversation that he had on CNN. Let's take a look.
When I asked you about Colonel Vindman, the very first thing you said was he was Ukrainian. So yes or no? Do you trust Ambassador Bill Taylor more because he was born in the United States? Where does the location of his birth matter? Mark Meadows, who I think you agree with, was born in France. Is he pro-French by definition? That's a pretty stunning comment you made just there. And it's remarkable and notable given that Laura Ingraham last night in her apparent talking points brought it up as well.
So I read his statement, John, and I'm sure you did as well. And it seems very clear that he is incredibly concerned about Ukrainian defense. I don't know that he's concerned about American policy, but his main mission was to make sure that the Ukraine got those weapons. I understand that. We all have an affinity to our homeland where we came from. Like me, I'm sure that Vindman has the same affinity. Or like Mark Meadows.
I'm just sorry. Are you suggesting that you would put Irish defense over U.S. defense? Is that what you're saying, Congressman?
So are we saying that by giving this money to the Ukraine, that absolutely is the money that's going to secure American national defense against Russia? I mean, I don't believe that. And so he's entitled to his opinion. He has an affinity, I think, for the Ukraine. He speaks Ukrainian. He came from the country, and he wants to make sure they're safe and free. I understand that.
That's an asset
but the
for
president
this country.
My point is the president is the one who gets to set the policy, and he's the one who looks out for America first.
All right, so I just got to say, John Berman with the great follow-ups there. Wait, are you saying that, because this person has a French background or whatever, or immigrated, or is this French, that they have an affinity towards France if they're an American citizen? Again, that's literal dual loyalty. Now, why don't you replace, and here's an exercise for Sean Duffy, replace Ukrainian with Jew. You end up getting a deeply anti-Semitic smear that they use against Jewish people. Oh, you've got dual loyalty. Oh, you've got dual loyalty. In fact, they were the same people that were, accusing Representative Ilhan Omar of having a dual loyalty with she's from Somalia, but having some sort of dual loyalty. They were accusing Omar of accusing Jewish people of having a dual loyalty when that's not at all what she was saying. So sorry about that. I got that a little confused, but nonetheless, that's sort of that same smear, right? That you say, oh, you've got a dual loyalty to Ukraine because you were born in Ukraine and brought here when you were 3 years old. Okay, really? All right. So now, here's the thing. I actually kind of figured that they would go with this smear. Why? Because that's what they do. Oh, we're gonna now play with the idea that you're the other, that you're not actually loyal to the country, to America. Oh, okay. Well, I see where you're going, right? Again, he's a naturalized citizen. He's an American, and he actually served in the military. Sean Duffy, however, is a moron and apparently a xenophobe. So now it's it continues. So now we go to Fox and Friends, right? So now Fox and Friends, Brian Kilmeade, they were having this discussion, and Brian Kilmeade's going to say something stupid. Take a look.
Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman has to say. He's an Iraq veteran. He's been detailed to the National Security Council. He's a 20-year vet. And he apparently heard that phone call and was so upset he went directly to his bosses and said, the president can't do that.
It's the same phone call that you have read, the transcript between our president and the president of Ukraine.
So he's got a Purple Heart, and he is from the Soviet Union. He emigrated here and has an affinity to the Ukrainian people.
Okay, so I love that. She's like, oh, no, it's the same transcript that you read. That's not a transcript. It's a memo. The actual transcript is literally locked away in a secret server. Gee, I wonder why it's locked away in a server. Weird. But anyway, so let's go to Kilmeade, right? So here we have more of the same, right? Implying, oh, look, he was born in the Soviet Union. He feels simpatico with Ukraine. And that's what's said. He's got an affinity towards the Ukrainian people. So for me, when he brings up, oh, it's the Soviet Union, right? I think that he wants to make the audience, by saying that, relate this guy to communism, right? And socialism. Well, Trump hates socialism. And so they want to think, oh, this guy's he's a socialist, communist, never Trumper that wants to take down the president. And so that's why he's lying about the transcript about Ukraine, because I read it and I didn't find anything wrong with that. But he must be making things up. See, that's what you have, right? But it's funny. It kind of counteracts the argument that Trump was just looking into corruption in Ukraine to help the Ukrainians. And now suddenly, when you look out for Ukraine or you feel some sort of simpatico with Ukraine, that somehow is bad. Right. The pretzels that they are twisting themselves into to defend Donald Trump is remarkable at this point. I never thought a game of Twister could go on for almost 4 straight years. These Republicans, man, all the time, I don't think they even remember what their original shape is anymore. Or remember at all what they actually believe. Again, they don't believe in law enforcement. They don't respect the troops. They don't respect the chain of command. And they don't respect conservative values of, not blowing up the deficit. Apparently, that was something that they seemed very concerned about during the Obama administration. Now they suddenly don't care as much. Now that we have over $1 trillion deficits, all that stuff. So, look, all this is in, unfortunately, service to President Donald Trump. It's absolutely gross, but that's what you get when you serve the emperor. Okay. So now let's go after Joe Biden. All right. Now, former Vice President Joe Biden is getting in a little bit of trouble for basically taking super PAC money. So now, recently, I reported that he started taking money from, a super PAC. So this is, corporate money. This is giant donor money because he hasn't been really doing very well in fundraising. And so now Biden, after this news, was confronted by a young activist with the hold on a second. Let me start again. I'm sort of off my game today. All right. It's one of those days, man. All right. So former Vice President Joe Biden's in a little bit of trouble, facing some scrutiny from progressives for his condescending tone that he took to an activist with the Sunrise Movement. So now I'm going to show you this video that has gone viral, and then I'll get the response, not only from the activist herself, but also kind of break it down. Let's take a look.
From Sunrise, and I'm terrified for our future since you've reversed it and now taking super PAC money. Since you're now taking super PAC money, how can we trust that you're not fighting for the people profiting off climate change?
Look at my record, child. Look at my record.
As you fight to go into the Iraq war and you
No, that's not right.
All right. So, look, woman in the video, she's actually not a child. She's 18-year-old at 11. And as I said, she's a volunteer with the Sunrise Movement. So before I get into the commentary, I just want to basically take a moment to thank her for confronting Joe Biden on this issue. I'd reported previously that Joe Biden has started accepting money from a super PAC. And so, of course, when you start taking money from super PACs, giant donors, giant bundlers, and corporations, there's the concern, and it's a huge concern, that you're not actually going to serve the people. You're going to serve the donors. And so that's why, of course, money is the biggest issue. I'm in favor of getting all the money out, corporate money, union money, all the money, and going to completely 100% publicly financed elections. Because if you have private financing of elections, you get private interests that buy the election. So now that's important when it comes to the climate change movement, because there will be no action on climate change if we have fossil fuel corporations continuing, as well as think tanks, continue to give massive amounts of money to politicians like Joe Biden. So she's asked an excellent question, and I give her a lot of credit for doing so. Now, his response, what he's getting slammed for, is completely condescending, dismissing her as essentially a child. I mean, you could see the agitation on his face. Oh, now listen here, child. And then telling her to look at his record, right? So, you know what we did? Well, we looked at his record. And of course, in all due fairness, because that's what we do on the show. We're fair. His record is mixed. There's good and bad. So now, for example, what I would say was bad is that the Obama-Biden administration did promote an all-of-the-above energy policy that promoted natural gas and fracking. And so while those are a little bit better than coal, for example, they still release large amounts of methane in the atmosphere, which of course methane is what, 20 times at least more potent in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide, even though it lasts for a shorter amount of time. It still has a larger impact. And so that is, of course, disastrous, right? So there's that. Not a great record, but again, that's the Obama-Biden administration. And he might have not been in favor of that. I don't know. But what we do know is that in his 2020 campaign, he's refused to join the other candidates to basically call for a ban on fracking, and has put together about a $1.7 trillion climate plan, which I think was plagiarized partly from other people's climate plans, which is interesting, but also less ambitious than some of his other rivals, specifically Bernie Sanders, and to a much lesser extent, Elizabeth Warren. Now, he also hired someone who's problematic. That's Heather Zakal, to advise him on climate policy. Now, Heather Zakal earned more than $1 million as a board member of a natural gas company. Oops. Now, here's the thing, right? So now Joe Biden has experience with people that he knows being on gas companies. For example, his son, Hunter Biden, was paid $50,000 a month to sit on the board of a Ukrainian gas company, Burisma. So that is what we call institutional corruption. Completely, perfectly legal, but at the same time, it's kind of a bribe. This is the company Burisma saying, hey, Joe Biden, we hired your son, so why don't you try to make more deals or do things that are friendly to us, which includes going against ambitious climate change agendas. So now, that said, speaking of climate change agendas, the Obama-Biden administration did push for and get the Paris Climate Agreement, which, look, I've criticized for not being strong enough, but it was literally at least an attempt to do something to set some sort of limit on climate change. Again, not as aggressive, but here in the Trump era, we don't even have the Paris Climate Agreement anymore, and we're on track for some major warming. So his record, not exactly great, but if you rate it against Donald Trump's, of course it's better, but not progressive, and nowhere what we actually need right now. We need a Green New Deal. So now, Levin, let's go to her. She's not thrilled with Biden's answer. She said this, quote, I'm upset that Joe Biden did not address any of the content of my question and instead referred to me in a very condescending way. I agree with that. Disastrous. And then she also said, he referenced good paying jobs in renewable energy in his speech, but he seems to be all talk. And of course, based on the fact that he gets money, or he may be getting money from these fossil fuel interests, I would agree with that. It would seem to be all talk. She continued by saying his support for former fossil fuel executives shows that he's continued to undermine low-income communities of color, specifically indigenous and black communities, through environmental racism and injustice, both here in eastern North Carolina and nationally. And so, look, that's kind of the reason that he won't answer that question. You can look at his hires. You can look at the information. You can see the policies that he's supported and the money that he has received. And so what's also funny is that he's got some hypocrisy as well. He did, after all, point out that super PACs basically leave you beholden to the donors. And now he has a super PAC. Excuse me. So, look, the problem is that he's going to take this donor money from the super PAC and from these large bundlers, which may involve fossil fuel companies, and really not do any sort of meaningful change because it will upset those donors. Which is why you have to get the money out. or the politicians will continue to take it. Again, Joe Biden taking it because he's faltering on fundraising. And as a result, we'll end up serving the donors and not actually doing what needs to be done. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream. Please consider becoming a patron or becoming a channel member and helping out the show. Thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys later.